Hare Krishna, my name is Alkananda Devi Dasi. I am an initiated disciple of His Grace Sankarshan Das Adhikari Prabhuji, who is a direct disciple of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. In this video, I shall give you a brief summary of Chapter 8 of Bhagavad Gita as it is, Attaining the Supreme. Bhagavad Gita is the ancient religious text that was spoken by Lord Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita about 5,000 years ago to the famous Kshatriya warrior Arjuna to motivate him to do his duty. Bhagavad Gita is a great source of valuable spiritual knowledge and wisdom that helps us to lead our lives righteously in accordance with Lord Krishna's instructions, so that we may become truly and eternally successful, peaceful, and blissful. Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, who was a pure devotee of Lord Krishna, has given the most authentic English translation of the Bhagavad Gita in his book, Bhagavad Gita as it is. We must take advantage of his wonderful book, follow Lord Krishna's teachings sincerely, and make our lives eternally sublime. In Chapter 8, Lord Krishna answers several questions of Arjuna, such as what is Brahman, what is the self, what are fruitive activities, what is the material manifestation, and who are the demigods. In verse number 3, Lord Krishna explains that Brahman is the indestructible, transcendental, living entity, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma or self. The activities pertaining to the temporary material bodies of living entities are called karma or fruitive activities. In his purport to the verse, Srila Prabhupada nicely explains that the Supreme Lord Krishna is also known as Parabrahman. The constitutional position of the living entity is different from his position in the material world. In material consciousness, the nature of the living entity is to act as the lord of matter, whereas in his spiritual or Krishna consciousness, his nature is to act as the servant of the Supreme Lord. The living entity can choose to identify himself either with matter or with the superior spiritual energy. Hence, he is called the Lord's marginal energy. If he identifies himself with the temporary material body, then in his next birth he will attain a material body in any of the 8,400,000 species of life in the material world. If he identifies himself with the spirit soul and practices Krishna consciousness sincerely, then in his next life he will get one type of spiritual body and will become eligible to enter the spiritual abode of the Lord. Krishna consciousness is the sublime process of performing pure loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord Krishna under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, who is in the disciplic succession starting from Lord Krishna himself. It purifies us of all the material contamination that we have accumulated over millions of lifetimes in the material world. It liberates us from the material miseries related to birth, disease, old age, and death, and eventually takes us to the spiritual world, which is characterized by eternity, knowledge, and pure bliss. In verse number 4, Lord Krishna explains that the physical nature, which is constantly changing, is called Adhibhuta or the material manifestation. The universal form of the Lord, which consists of the demigods such as the sun and the moon, is called Adhidaiva or Virat Purusha. The demigods are emanations from the Supreme Lord Krishna and are subordinate to him. They have been given special powers by the Lord to carry out the administration of the material world. The Supreme Lord, who is seated as Paramatma or Super Soul in the heart of every living entity, is called Adi Yagna or the Lord of Sacrifice. The legs of the universal form of the Lord are made of the lower planetary systems. The eyes are the sun and the moon, and the head is made of the upper planetary systems. Srila Prabhupada clearly explains in his purport that the body of the living entities undergoes 6 types of changes in the material world: birth, growth, maintenance, formation of byproducts, dwindling, and vanishing. The gigantic universal form of the Lord is contemplated on by the neophyte who cannot understand or meditate on the Super Soul or Paramatma in the heart. The Lord as Paramatma is seated in the heart of every living entity next to the individual soul, who is called Jivatma. He silently observes the activities of the soul, kindly gives him the opportunity to act freely, and even facilitates his desires. Next, verse number 6 is an important verse. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. This verse tells us about the process of changing one's nature at the critical time of death. If one remembers Lord Krishna at the time of death, he will attain a transcendental body similar to that of the Lord and will be eligible to enter the spiritual abode of the Lord. If one remembers an animal at the time of quitting his body, then he will become that animal in his next birth. For example, Maharaja Bharat remembered his pet deer at the time of leaving his body, and therefore he acquired the body of a deer in his next life. It is also important to know that one's thoughts during his lifetime accumulate to influence his thoughts at the time of death. Hence, it is essential to always remember Lord Krishna during our life by practicing Krishna consciousness sincerely. We will then be able to surely remember Lord Krishna at the time of death and could go back home to Godhead in the spiritual world to experience eternity, knowledge, and pure bliss forever. Srila Prabhupada clearly explains in his purport that a simple way to remember Lord Krishna at the time of death is by regularly chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is a very powerful and auspicious mantra that is recommended in the scriptures to achieve liberation in the present age of Kali Yuga. By regularly chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, we will be purified of all the material contamination and could become liberated from material miseries forever. In verse number 7, Lord Krishna advises Arjuna to always think of him as Krishna and to simultaneously do his prescribed duty of fighting in the war. He assures Arjuna that by dedicating all his activities and fixing his mind and intelligence on Lord Krishna, he will surely attain him. In his purport to the verse number 8, Srila Prabhupada wonderfully explains that by regularly chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and hearing the transcendental sound vibrations, we will be able to utilize our ears, tongue, mind, and intelligence in the service of Lord Krishna and thus purify them. We will thus become eligible to go back home to Godhead where we actually belong. In verse number 9, Lord Krishna instructs Arjuna to always meditate upon him as the Supreme Person who knows everything, who is the oldest, who is the controller and the maintainer, who is smaller than the smallest, who is inconceivable and is always a person. This verse refutes the claim that the Supreme Lord is impersonal or void. The Supreme Lord is a person, Lord Krishna, who knows about the past, present, and future of all living entities. He is said to be the oldest because everything emanates from him and he is the cause of all causes. He is the controller and maintainer and instructor of all living entities. He is considered to be smaller than the smallest because he is present inside the hearts of all living entities, including the tiniest organisms. He pervades everything and maintains innumerable planetary systems. His activities and powers are inconceivable and beyond our material perception. He is called Achintya or inconceivable because we cannot understand him with our limited senses, mind, and intelligence. Hence, we have to rely on authentic scriptures such as the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and the Vedas to understand him. In the subsequent verses, Lord Krishna describes two methods for attaining him. One is by the mystic yoga process of fixing the life air between the eyebrows, maintaining strict celibacy, chanting the syllable Om, and meditating on the super soul in the heart without deviation. Such yogis attain the spiritual planets of the Lord. The other method is by always meditating on the impersonal Brahmajyoti feature of the Lord and trying to merge into his existence. Brahmajyoti refers to the bright effulgence emanating from the transcendental body of the Supreme Lord Krishna, who is seated in his spiritual abode. Both these methods are very time consuming and very difficult to perform and hence not feasible. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was an incarnation of Lord Krishna, appeared about 500 years ago and mercifully introduced the simple method of chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to attain liberation in the present degraded age of Kali Yuga. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. By sincerely chanting this mantra every day and by hearing the transcendental sound vibrations, we could be purified of all material contamination and go back home to Godhead in the spiritual sky to experience eternity, knowledge, and pure bliss forever. Then the next important verse is verse number 14. Ananya chetaha satatam yomam smarati nityasaha tasyaham sulabha partha nityayuktasya yoginaha. For one who always remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain, O son of Pritha, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. This verse describes the final destination of the pure, unalloyed devotees of Lord Krishna who practice Bhakti Yoga or Krishna consciousness sincerely. Unalloyed Bhakti is pure loving devotional service to Lord Krishna, which is not mixed with Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, or Dhyana Yoga. This means that a devotee does not desire fruitive results, knowledge obtained by philosophical speculation, merging into Brahman, mystic yogic powers, or any type of liberation. His only desire is to always serve and please Lord Krishna. The Supreme Lord Krishna gives his special mercy to such devotees and grants them the intelligence to understand him completely and to eventually come to him. In verse number 15, Lord Krishna describes the material world as Dukkhalayam Ashashvatam, a place which is temporary and full of miseries. Great yogis who are pure devotees of Lord Krishna are called Mahatmas, and they attain the supreme, eternal, spiritual planets and never come back to the miserable material world. Then the next important verse is verse number 16. Abrahma bhuvana loka punaravartino arjuna mam upetya tu kaunteya punarjanma na vidyate. From the highest planets in the material world, Brahmaloka, down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. In his purport, Srila Prabhupada wonderfully explains that Goloka Vrindavana or Krishna Loka is the topmost spiritual planet which is attained only by practicing Bhakti Yoga and not by any other method such as Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga or Dhyana Yoga. Those who attain the demigod planets due to past pious activities may enjoy a very long lifespan and abundant material comforts, but after their pious credits have depleted, they come back down to the earth again. The miseries of the material world, such as birth, disease, old age, and death, exist in all the material planets, including the topmost planets such as Brahmaloka, Indraloka, and Chandraloka. Hence, a truly intelligent person, such as a devotee of Lord Krishna, does not desire to go to any material planet. Simply by performing pure loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord Krishna, a devotee is transferred to the eternal spiritual abode of Lord Krishna, which is situated far beyond the material planets and is characterized by the absence of miseries related to birth, disease, old age, and death. Verse number 17 describes the duration of the material universe. It is manifest in cycles of kalpas. A kalpa is a day of Lord Brahma and includes 1,000 cycles of the 4 yugas combined. The 4 yugas are Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. Satya Yuga is characterized by virtuosity, religiosity, wisdom, with practically no vice. It lasts 1,728,000 years. Treta Yuga is characterized by little vice and it lasts 1,296,000 years. Dwapara Yuga is characterized by more vice and it lasts 864,000 years. The present age of Kali Yuga is full of vice with practically no virtue, religion, or wisdom. Its duration is 432,000 years. One day of Brahma is a kalpa and is of 12 hours duration, and his night is also of the same duration. One day of Brahma is equal to 311 trillion and 40 billion Earth years. Although it appears to be a very long lifespan, in the viewpoint of eternity, its duration is only that of a flash of lightning. In the subsequent verses, Lord Krishna explains that at the beginning of Brahma's day, all living entities are manifest from the unmanifest state, and when night falls, they merge into the unmanifest again. In contrast to the material world, the spiritual world where the Supreme Lord resides is described as eternal, unmanifest, infallible, and the supreme destination from which no one ever returns. It is characterized by variegatedness, beauty, opulence, complete knowledge, and pure spiritual bliss. The Supreme Lord is attained only by pure loving devotional service and not by any other method. The Supreme Lord is all pervading by His material and spiritual energies in both the material and spiritual worlds. In his purport to verse number 23, Srila Prabhupada nicely explains that those practicing Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, or Dhyana Yoga have to select a suitable time to leave the body so that they will not return to the miserable material world. By practicing Dhyana Yoga sincerely, a perfect mystic yogi can select a suitable time to leave his body and attain the supreme spiritual planets. If he is not so perfect, his success depends on his accidentally passing away at a suitable time. In verse number 24, Lord Krishna explains that a yogi can attain the supreme by passing away from the material body during the time of the fiery god in the light at an auspicious moment of the day, during the fortnight of the waxing moon, or during the 6 months when the sun travels in the north. Such yogis attain the impersonal Brahma Jyoti effulgence in the spiritual sky. In verse number 25, Lord Krishna tells us that a yogi who passes away during the smoke in the night, during the fortnight of the waning moon, or during the 6 months when the sun travels in the south, attains the moon planet but again comes back. He may enjoy a very long lifespan and abundant material comforts on the moon and may live there for about 10,000 years, but eventually comes back to the earth. A pure devotee of Lord Krishna is, however, not worried about the time of his death. He is satisfied and happy simply by serving the Lord with love and devotion in the material world, and is confident that after his death he will be able to continue serving the Lord in the spiritual world. In verse number 27, Lord Krishna advises Arjuna to remain fixed in his devotional service towards him and to not become bewildered by the different paths that are available to attain him. Srila Prabhupada further explains that by becoming completely absorbed in devotional service to Lord Krishna, a devotee's path to the spiritual kingdom of the Lord is safe, certain, and direct. Then the next important verse is verse number 28. Vedeshu yagneshu tapassu chaiva daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtam atyeti tat sarvam idam viditva yogi param sthanam upaiti chadyam. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical or fruitive activities. Simply by practicing devotional service, he attains all these and eventually reaches the supreme eternal abode. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these and at the end reaches the supreme eternal abode. This verse wonderfully describes the several advantages of practicing bhakti yoga or devotional service. Srila Prabhupada wonderfully explains in his purport that the purpose of studying Vedas is to build good character and not for mental speculation. In the Vedic culture, the Vedic study is meant specifically for brahmacharis who are in the age group of 5 to 25 years. A brahmachari studies the Vedas under the guidance of a spiritual master and practices severe austerities while under his care. At the age of 25 years, he is allowed to get married and enter the Grihastha ashram. In this ashram, he has to perform several sacrifices and give charity to brahmanas and other qualified persons to attain further enlightenment. At the age of 50, he enters the Vanaprastha ashram, retires from household life, practices severe austerities such as living in the forest, wearing simple clothing, and so on. Then the final stage is called sannyasa, during which a person renounces all material life and dedicates his life to preaching about God consciousness. By practicing the Varnashrama Dharma, a person could be elevated spiritually and eventually attain the perfectional stage of life. He may be promoted to the higher planets in the material world, and when he is more spiritually advanced, he is liberated into the spiritual sky, either in the impersonal Brahmajyoti or in the spiritual or Vaikuntha planets. A devotee of Lord Krishna, however, surpasses all the rituals of the different orders of life and derives all their benefits by simply performing pure loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord Krishna. Srila Prabhupada also emphasizes that one must understand the instructions of Lord Krishna not by scholarship or by mental speculation, but by hearing in the association of devotees. Bhagavad Gita is understood clearly only by a devotee and not by a scholar or a mental speculator. Hence, one must learn about Bhagavad Gita only from a devotee. By associating with devotees, one is able to advance spiritually and will be able to start engaging in devotional service to Lord Krishna. Devotional service dispels all misgivings about Lord Krishna, his names, forms, glories, pastimes, and other features. Thus, one could become fixed in Krishna consciousness, relish the study of Bhagavad Gita, and attain the state of always feeling Krishna conscious. In the advanced stage, a devotee develops complete and pure love for Lord Krishna. This highest perfectional stage of bhakti is called prema, and it enables a devotee to be transferred to the topmost spiritual planet known as Goloka Vrindavana or Krishna Loka. There he could associate directly with the Supreme Lord Krishna and experience pure spiritual bliss forever. So that was about the summary of chapter 8 of Bhagavad Gita as it is. In my next video, I shall talk to you about chapter 9. Thank you. Hare Krishna.